Good morning, honorable members, public officers. This House is now in Standing Finance Committee. When we suspended yesterday, we were under the head of the Office of the Attorney General, and we were with the Honourable Member for St. James North. Before the Honourable Member is allowed to continue his questioning, let me remind the House and let me be quite clear on the standing orders as it relates to these sessions. And I will quote standing order number 67.3. A question to the ministers shall not exceed 3 minutes. Let me indicate that you can either ask a question, you get straight to your question, and then you have the opportunity for 3 related, or what we call supplementary questions. The standing order does not provide, or on the other hand, if you want to speak, you have that 3 minutes. You cannot speak for 3 minutes and then pose a question 2. So it's either one or the other. You get straight to your question, as little preamble as possible, and then you have the opportunity to raise 3 related questions, and then I will direct that you give way to another member. Just be clear on that. At this time, I will ask the Honourable Member for St. James North to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everyone, Honourable Attorney General, and to your team especially. Attorney General, this is relating as well, obviously, to the judicial system, magistrates courts, which I raised yesterday, and the issue of expungement of records. Of course, the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act informs this decision, and we are well aware that in Barbados, I think it was estimated that about 85% of jobs, and outside, Attorney General, of what you spoke, like in public works, and we know NCC, require a police certificate of character which shows no criminal record. And I'm just wondering if you can give this Parliament and obviously the public of Barbados an insight into the frequency or that people with convictions, our citizens, our constituents, apply to have their records expunged, and if there's any contemplation within the immediate future to further reform that piece of legislation to make it easier, perhaps for our constituents with adverse criminal records to be able to have them expunged. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The criminal records rehabilitation of offenders legislation is one that has played an important role in supporting the rehabilitation process and practice in Barbados. In 2017, the legislation was amended to change the periods, what are called rehabilitation periods. That is the period which must pass, the period of time which must pass before a person will be eligible to have their record expunged. In about 2020, this administration provided a gloss on that when we passed the legislation. I'm not sure if it was 2020, it could have been a little bit later. When we passed the legislation which removed much of the criminality associated with the possession of small amounts of marijuana. You might recall, I remember that in that legislation, it was provided that all convictions for minor possession would be automatically expunged. And that fact alone removed a significant portion of criminal records from Barbadians who had been charged and convicted with possession of a spliff and so on. The work of that committee still continues. The challenge that we have, though, is one relating to the use of the Barbados Police Service in the process. And when I say that it is a challenge, it is because whenever an applicant is being considered, not only do you consider the documentary evidence that is there, the police are required to weigh in on his application to determine whether it is a reasonable thing to do to expunge his record. There was a noted case where some individuals had been charged with drug offenses, but had been serious drug offenses too, but had been given non-custodial sentences. And at that time, I think the period was 3 years. If that period passes without you having another conviction, then you could get your record expunged. They had applied. And on paper, it looked as though it would have been appropriate to grant it. But the wisdom of involving the police is seen from the fact that the police intelligence indicated that those individuals were involved in the identical crime, I think it was trafficking in drugs, in neighboring islands, and had been charged for those offenses in those islands. And therefore, the recommendation was that the records would not be expunged. So in every instance where individuals apply, the police then have to take up the file, do some investigations, and see exactly what is the status of this person. Are they still involved in crime? I think you would agree that to go purely on whether or not you have further convictions would be unwise. Because a person might have a conviction wanted expunged, but might have another 15 or 20 charges pending trial. So it would be unwise for the board to exercise its discretion to expunge an individual's record in that way. There may also be circumstances where there are suspects, even though they may not have been charged in other criminal offenses. And then, of course, there's the matter of the significance of foreign criminal records. So I'm happy to say that a lot of Barbadians are still applying. There is a tremendous benefit from giving these individuals an opportunity to have a clean record. But as you would be aware, the legislation provides that in some instances, their original criminal record can still be looked at in certain cases. There is a need to reconsider how the legislation is currently structured. I have had representations made to me to open up the scope of the application of the statute. As it stands now, and I have it in front of me, I can tell you, a person who has a sentence of between 3 and 7 years has to wait 10 years after they serve the term of imprisonment. There's an argument that 10 years is probably too long. A person can demonstrate significant and thorough rehabilitation in a period of less than 10 years. In addition, what our provisions say is that if you are sent to prison for a period in excess of 7 years, you simply can't have your record expunged at all. So as long as you have more than 7 years imprisonment, it does not matter how good a citizen you become after that, you cannot have your record expunged. Again, people have approached me and argued, AG, if you're serious about rehabilitation, we can't just stop at 10 years. There are individuals who can't just stop at 7 years. It is bad enough that you have to make them wait another 10 years before you can consider the expungement. But to determine that a person who's been in prison for 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 years should not have their record expunged is a bit hard. So it continues to work well. It's a significant tool in the arsenal of the government when it comes to rehabilitation, but there is significant argument that we need to do some amendments, and those things are being considered.
Thank you, Attorney General. And Mr. Chairman, I believe I have one further supplementary arising out of this particular issue, with the police having a role in expungement of records. Attorney General, you mentioned yesterday that you are 290 police officers short of what is considered the absolute total. And of course, we historically, in the past, exported a lot of policemen to countries like Cayman Islands and Bermuda. And I'm just wondering if with freedom of movement among CARICOM states, whether there is any contemplation of trying to advertise for employment of police officers in other CARICOM countries, for example, to try to boost our numbers in terms of the police force. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It is of tremendous importance to us that we increase the size of the police service to the 1,500 members that we have statutory provision for. I will say that we have managed to do very well with the numbers that we have. I will also say that the use of technology has served as a force multiplier in many respects. The use of cameras in our streetscape and so on, all of those things have helped to reduce the need for bodies on the ground. But at the same time though, policing has become more complicated, the criminal element has become more complicated, even the course of trials have become more complicated, and we therefore still do need to find a way to increase the complement of police officers to the 1,500 that is provided for in the statute and in the emoluments. The matter of bringing in police officers from overseas is one that has always been on the table for discussion, but we have never taken it up. I can say to you that this administration is certainly not against in any way bringing in police officers from overseas. Certainly the opposite has worked to great effect. We had a Barbadian police officer who left here, I think, as a sergeant. He went to Bermuda. When he left Bermuda, he was so well regarded in that society that he acted as the governor of Bermuda on numerous occasions. He's now retired to a place in St. Thomas in my constituency called Mount Wilton. I'm happy to have him back. So our officers have done very well. So there's no reason why we would believe that bringing officers from overseas will be to our detriment. I do not think it would be. The police service has, at my request, prepared a paper on the matter of recruiting police officers from overseas. That paper now has to be considered, but it appears to me that the police service does not have any opposition to either recruiting police officers, people who are already qualified as police officers, to come to Barbados to work as police officers. There's significant benefit in that because you're bringing in people who already know the ropes. They would just have to become acclimatized to our legal arrangements and our police practice. And then there's also the option of recruiting from scratch young men and women from across the region to come to Barbados and be trained as police officers in our police service. You would appreciate, though, that there are a number of details that have to be worked out, so I cannot say that it is a matter that has received the fullest and maturest consideration, but it is certainly on the table, and the work has begun. As I said, I have a paper from the police on the subject, we will do some more work on it, and hopefully within the next few months, we'll be in a position to take something to Cabinet and seek Cabinet's fiat to see how we can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James North. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Attorney General, sometime yesterday, reference was made to a scheme known as a Startwise scheme. And, I beg your pardon. Sometime yesterday, a reference was made to a scheme known as Startwise within your ministry. And it was stated that 1,904 persons benefited from that Startwise scheme. That's the name of the scheme, isn't it? Startwise. Thank you. Well, let me shorten it then. Are you familiar? Are you familiar? And either minister can take the question, but it is directed primarily to the Attorney General, the Honourable Attorney General. Are you familiar, Mr. Attorney General, with this scheme known as the Startwise?
Yes, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, there is a program called Startwise, which is to be distinguished from another program called Parentwise.
Let us deal with Startwise. And hoping that you will confirm that this Startwise scheme was reported yesterday to have benefited 1,904 persons.
No, sir.
Okay. Now, I am saying to you that it was said yesterday by the Honourable Member for the City that the Startwise program benefited 1,904 persons.
No, sir. He said parent-wise, not start-wise.
Parent-wise, I beg your pardon. Well, let us deal with Startwise. And let me ask you whether Startwise was intended to benefit 2,000 persons.
No, sir.
You do know of the Startwise scheme, though, do you?
Yes, I do
Yes,
know of the
thank you.
Startwise scheme
Thank you very much.
program.
All right. Let me put a set of facts to you, and you will confirm or deny.
I don't know if the honourable member thinks he is cross-examining a witness in court,
No, I don't
but
think so.
I ask that he follow the standing orders.
No, Your Honor, we've had a back and forth. So let us.
We've had questions and we've had answers, but you go ahead.
If the honourable member wishes to say that he does not wish to answer the questions, I'll accept that. We've had a back and forth, and he's clarified, the honourable member has clarified that I was speaking of one scheme and he was speaking of another. Permit me, therefore, in fair dispensation, to proceed with the honourable member and his Minister of State if he wishes to participate as well. Thank you, sir. Was Startwise managed and coordinated by a consultant within this government?
No, sir.
I'll take the answers. Was not. Do you know the cost, the ultimate cost of that Startwise program? Startwise.
The Startwise program, I think, came in at just over $2 million Barbados dollars.
And finally, I'm just taking the information, you see? It's no wrestling match. And may I ask how many persons were intended to benefit from that scheme and how many eventually graduated from that scheme?
The Startwise program was a program which we launched as a pilot program. And this pilot program saw us reaching out to at-risk youth to train them in terms of working for technology companies remotely. A number of individuals were approached. We had individuals going into communities, talking to at-risk youth, encouraging them to join the scheme. We engaged a total of 1,446 young men and women. The total number of seats available in the first cohort was 150 seats. By seats, I mean spaces available for the training. We exceeded that number. A total of 635 people applied for the first cohort. A total of 168 people were accepted. But of that 168 who were accepted, only 145 actually took up the spaces. Some withdrew, one was dismissed for disciplinary reasons, some accepted offers from outside. There was another cohort that had 55 seats available. We engaged 100 young men and women, 70 applied, we accepted 44. This program sought to train Barbadian young men and women for a very vibrant market, doing work for companies overseas, generally data type work and so on. And the idea was that we would provide as the first set of people, the at-risk young men and women, because the intelligence said that they would be able to make about $5,000 a month working when once they were engaged. The pilot program is finished. We had some challenges along the way. We found that some of the people who we reached out to in the at-risk set, let me be very frank, this required training in technology, training in computers and so on. So you found that a lot of the people that you approached simply did not have the skill set to even begin. Let us be frank in our discussion. So you go into a community, you talk to the at-risk young men and women. They say, yeah, man, $5,000 a month sound good. But when you delve into it, you discover that they don't know how to navigate their way around a computer. So instead of being able to get them immediately jumped into the program, you now have to give them skills that they never had because they didn't pay any attention to those things at school. The pilot is completed. I am waiting for specifics on exactly how many jobs were sourced through it. But the pilot was completed around middle or so of last year.
Your Honor, I will rest with the answer that the Attorney General does not have figures as to the number of persons who graduated. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chair, sorry, Mr. Chair, forgive me. I was dealing with a chairman of a board this morning, sorry. I will take the opportunity to make an address rather than asking the questions, because I want to cover a number of matters, and I guess the Attorney General can pick what he wishes to respond to out of what it is that I intervene on behalf of. First of all, allow me to extend my condolences, and probably condolences of almost everybody in here, to the police force on the passing of the PRO, Rodney Innes. I knew Rodney back as boys, and he was a fantastic person. Then he grew into a most admirable gentleman, and he represented all that was good in the police service. And I am sure you're gonna feel his loss tremendously, but please accept the condolences to all who worked with him, you, Commissioner, and all his family and friends. So, one thing that Rodney was a good community person. And he helped the police to bridge the gap between the police service and the community. Now, I've been concerned about the outposts, the police outposts that have been put up in some areas that the Honourable Leader Opposition doesn't like the word hotspots. I don't actually like it either, but some areas of concern in communities where we have a higher than average incidence of violence or criminal behavior. One such was positioned in Silver Sands, in my constituency, but I realize for the large percentage, these posts seem to not be manned and to be closed. Now, if it was deemed important enough to put a police outpost in an area, then I wonder what is the rationale for having a lot of them closed, whether it's a manpower issue and whether there are plans to actually address that, because I will say the officers who were stationed there in Silver Sands actually did form a bond with the community. They interacted with the children, so the children coming up got to see the police as something other than somebody coming to break on your door looking for your father or your brother, right? So I think it's a great idea, it's a great way to bridge that gap, and I'm wondering what is the current status of that and what is the plan for it for this year. Now, the other thing as well that I want to commend the police for in their reach, they seem to be moving with the times, is their social media presence. The police have burst onto the scene with their social media in a way that has captured the imagination of Barbadians. And I want to commend them for that. A lot of times we don't get cooperation when we need it because people are afraid of persons. They're afraid of the image of persons. But when you see somebody that you once feared being presented in a way that makes them a lot less fearful, you are more inclined to actually step up to the plate and assist. So I just want to commend the police on that. Now, my other concern, sir, is with the registry, registration department. We talk about the backlogs in the court, but there seems to be a serious backlog in the registry in relation to things like probates, issuing certificates. 30 seconds, sir. And I, for one, cannot understand why, if I'm applying for a replacement document in particular, it must be on a computer somewhere, why I should have to come back in 2 weeks or 7 days to get that document. What is being done to speed up the processes in the registry in this age of technology? I should be able to get a replacement document, have him pay for it, wait for it, and collect it the same day. It happens in Trinidad. So I know as a fact in the registry in Trinidad, so I don't see why it can't happen here. So as I said, my other concern is that if we are moving, the Prime Minister keeps saying that she wants, the aim for 2025 should be to excel in the delivery of the basics, right? That is a basic thing, probably one of the most basic functions that the registry does. It is simply sourcing a document and reproducing it. What are we doing to speed up those processes that aggravate people and cause people angst, particularly at vulnerable points in their life? So that is my intervention. As I said, sir, the Honourable AG or his officers are free to address any, all, or none. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to ask the Commissioner to address the matter of the matters that you raised related to the police.
Richard Boyce, Commissioner of Police. Morning all. In respect of the caravans, which the issue that was raised by the Minister, Chair, what I would say is that the caravans for us is seen as very, very much needed in those communities, especially communities where we notice that they are most needed. And for us, caravan is not a one-by-night or fly-by-night event. For us, it is a long haul. And the planning of it is to build it up and build it out. So it will take time when you move into any district, any community. There's that type of relationship that have to be built gradually Yes, people might looking for instant satisfaction and successes, but we deal with human nature. In every house in the communities, every single house, you will find different mindsets. So the many types of persons that you have to work with in these communities. If it was a one-size-fits-all, no problem. So that is one of the challenges that we have to look at. Getting to know the persons in the community, getting to know exactly what their problems are, getting to find out the persons who are willing to work with the police, and getting to know the persons who are likely to be involved in mischief and other unwholesome acts. So for us, we are focused in having those areas really brought into the realm of living in harmony, keeping away from doing any criminal activity or antisocial behavior, and over and above anything else, building the bonds between themselves and law enforcement officers. So people, as you mentioned, might have, when you put a caravan in a particular district, people will want to tag it and say, well, people who live in this area are bad people or willing to commit criminal offenses. It may be so, it may not be so. But the main thing is to have that police presence in those areas so that every person, and the intent of it is to have persons feel safe. That feel safe factor in communities can do wonders for us and the entire island. Years ago, before things became so hectic in terms of regular incidents of crime, there was that bond between each community and police officer. And people in those communities knew the officers well, first name, and there was that type of atmosphere where police officers go in homes and relax and such like. But those days are no longer with us. So our intent is to build back that type of bridge, that type of interrelationship with persons, whereby we can have a whole family setting in terms of how we live, how we relate. As persons mentioned before, the way persons currently now engage the police more often than not in a very hostile way. So if you want to get rid of that hostility, we must do things that people will embrace us, embrace the officers of the organization. So we will stick to it. And as I mentioned, it is not a one-off situation. It's a type of a love affair with the communities that we're looking to create. And we can only do that by having those enduring relationships with communities as we go forward. So yes, we will continue being in those communities in respect of the manpower aspect of it. At some times during our policing year, there are some months whereby we have high numbers and low numbers to do the policing rollout. And you will find that when the numbers are plenty, caravans will be properly structured, manpower-wise, to function. But when you get things that crop over, other engagements, then you have to pull persons from point A and put them in location B. So those are all factors that will come into play where the caravans are concerned. And if we even talk about the resource center in Gold Hill, that is going fine as far as we are concerned. So there are successes in some locations, some areas, but some other areas we'll find a little hard knots that we have to untangle. And we are focused on that, and we'll continue to put the caravans. In fact, only a couple of weeks ago, I was watching YouTube, and I saw the Prime Minister in St. Lucia now employing caravans in various communities. So it is something that other persons are embracing. So we in Barbados will not want to jettison our caravans when other persons in the Caribbean are now embracing them. So we are on the right track. And as I mentioned, the numbers may be low, but we cannot throw our arms in the air and give up. We will continue on that path.
Thank you, Commissioner. In relation to the modernization of the registration department, and I really think that that is the nub of what we need to be looking at. It would be a wonderful thing to be able to apply for a birth certificate online and to get it. It would be a wonderful thing to be able to apply for a copy of your decree nisi or whatever it is and get it. I indicated yesterday that vital statistics is to be migrated to the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So when the Electoral and Boundaries Commission has that particular platform set up, then that is something that would be within their remit. I'll remind you that that kind of approach is not unknown to us. The police certificate of character that used to be a manual process is now online. The challenge that we face, though, is that it's much easier to digitize criminal records than it is to digitize court files. And therefore, matters relating to probate, matters relating to divorces and so on, they will represent a different challenge. But let me just say that I would love to see the day when we can have the system so digitized that whatever document you want, you can pay a fee and be able to get it online. Our only challenge, though, will be a mindset. I remember having to produce a death certificate from England. And in England, you apply for your death certificate online, they send you an email and you print off the document. Of course, when I presented the registry, I was asked for a seal. And they said, but this get printed off a computer. Well, how do I know this is authentic? They required some measure of authentication before they were satisfied. So we're going to have to find ways to be able to authenticate documents to eliminate the possibility of fraud. But I thank you for your suggestion. It's one that we will look at.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the Chamber. Let me begin by congratulating the public servants who have taken on the task so admirably of educating the public and indeed this chamber of the work, the good work being done in the office of the Attorney General. And that is from my heart. And I want to go and compliment my special friend, also my advisor, the Attorney General. And you know, we often say there's always a method to madness, but there's also a method to wise decisions. And I congratulate the Prime Minister for making the choice of Attorney General back in 2018. Much to the anguish of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, but I compliment the Prime Minister for making a wise choice in the Attorney General, Dale Marshall. But my question relates to investment, the investment climate in this country. We are monitoring, Mr. Chairman and members of this chamber, some $4 billion, member for Christchurch West, you can help me, some $4 billion in investment. Now, this country is showing signs of a blustering economic environment after coming out of years in the doldrums in terms of investment in this country. And I know that the several significant investments being made in this country, the investors are looking for a speedy response from the judicial system. And I pose a question to you, Attorney General, and your team. And it's only one question I will ask this morning, but it's a very important question. Where are we with the commercial courts? The commercial court, sorry.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. George South. In 2019, we made amendments to the Supreme Court of Judicature Act. Among the things that we dealt with on that occasion was the statutory establishment of a commercial division of the High Court. We recognized that the delays that were attendant with judicial proceedings, while a number of people will sit back and say, man, the court's slow and you know, we expect that's how businesses operate. There's a category of individual who will have no patience with that. And that category of individual is well represented by the many investors that we have been seeking to bring into Barbados and to bring millions and sometimes billions of dollars into our economy. The places that they come from, there are dedicated commercial courts that are expected to dispose of complex civil law matters in very short periods of time. I remember from my own personal experience being involved in a piece of litigation in the High Court in Barbados. It was a complex piece of litigation. And it was an application for injunctive relief. We labored for many days in the court, arguing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth before the judge. The parties had a presence in Turks and Caicos. And they applied in Turks and Caicos for the same injunction that they applied for in Barbados. The matter was heard that morning in Turks and Caicos, and by the afternoon, a decision was given, and by 9 o'clock the next morning, the complete written decision of the judge was in the hands of the litigant. In other words, a matter that was taking us day after day after day after day to address in our High Court was dealt with in a wholesome and satisfactory way within a time period of 18 hours. That is what a commercial court is supposed to do. To be fair though, commercial court judges have to be judges that have the opportunity to specialize. Young member to your left is a dentist and well understands the concept of specialization. Because if a person who is only accustomed to pulling teeth is then asked to deal with a piece of, what do you call it, maxillofacial surgery, he will either mess it up. In fact, there's a good chance that he'll mess it up. The law is no different. And commercial matters, yes, many of them can be simple and resolved in simple ways. But when you have technical cross-border disputes, all kinds of things, contracts with 300 pages of annexures and so on, they're complicated. And our judges therefore need to be able to sit, grapple with it, and dispose of it quickly. The only way to get to that level is to have a dedicated commercial court. We are already seeing the benefits of having a dedicated criminal court. That's all those judges do. And having a dedicated commercial court would be ideal. As I said, we passed the law to recognize the commercial court, to set out what areas will be dealt with by the commercial court. We engaged a consultant to draft the amendments to the to the civil procedure rules to give teeth to the commercial court, but unfortunately it stopped there. I'm happy to say, though you use the word doldrums, in your opening comment. I'm happy to say that we are about to get out of the doldrums. The Chief Justice and I have set up a working group, and that working group's only purpose is to look at the amendments to the civil procedure rules, which will give effect now to the workings of the commercial court. We're going to look at the question of fees, because if you want a matter, the filing fee for a high court matter is $50. It has been $50 when I started practicing law 35 years ago. If you want to have a matter addressed by specialized judges in a way that is cognizant of the value of money, then you gotta be willing to pay for it. So one of the things that we'll be considering is a higher tariff of filing fees for commercial court matters. All of this is to say that the work on the commercial court has now been enthusiastically taken up by the current Chief Justice, and it is our expectation that the rules have been drafted, but they're now being relooked at. I'm going to have, the Chief Justice assured me he will complete that review before the end of this week. So by Friday, I will have his comments on those draft rules. The working group will meet in the following week, and I anticipate that that will take no more than 2 meetings. I have to engage, of course, with the Ministry of Finance, because they have to agree to the tariff of fees. But we have, at this point in time, 9 judges in the civil division of the High Court, and the Chief Justice has indicated to me that he already has in mind how he will allocate those judges so as to make sure that we will have a robust commercial court. We will have to come back to Parliament and make a slight amendment to the Supreme Court of Judicature Act, because we did not include 1 or 2 categories of matters, but those can also be easily dealt with under practice direction. I regret that it has taken this long, but you will appreciate that even the making of rules do not come to the Office of the Attorney General. The making of amendments to the civil procedure rules fall within the Rules Committee of the Supreme Court. I don't even have to see them. So, and I have no control over the Chief Justice, how they work. So, I'm happy to say, though, that I think I can promise the people of Barbados that we'll have a fully functioning commercial court before the middle of.
Thank you, Attorney General. No further questions.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George South. Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I first want to start by joining all of my colleagues in congratulating the Honorable Attorney General and his team for the excellent work they've been doing. Certainly at the CPC, I've been pleased with the large amount of legislation, technical as it were, to be able to get it through to Parliament. And I want to say thank you to them. We have had considerable consultations where we did the Protection of Agricultural Products Act, what most people refer to as Prairie Larceny Bill. And that took a lot of work and lots of months to pull together. I am also very pleased with the social media presence of the Barbados Police Service, especially Wanted Mondays. And most Barbadians are very happy when those social media posts come out, because one, they get to see that people are willingly turning themselves in, and if they're not, the police are in very, very nimble time able to apprehend perpetrators of crime in Barbados. And I think that rather than focus on the acts of crime that take place, we should focus as a country on the turnaround time from the Barbados Police Service in dealing with those people who are involved in criminal activity.
So I always maintain that conversations are had based on one's agenda, and many times those who are not steeped in research or those who do not dare to follow will be led astray by those who have their agendas in seeking to mislead the country. However, I was party to several conversations with my stakeholders in the agricultural sector. And I must say that many of them are not very happy. And they have reported to me that the whole issue of predial larceny is not taken very seriously, and that they would like to see more being done in order for people who are involved in crop theft to be dealt with similar to those who we see on wanted Mondays for other crimes. And they have asked me to ask, what is the status with the predial larceny unit within the Barbados Police Service, and to refer to the Act, the Protection of Agricultural Products Act 2022, at sections 7 and 8 and section 7.1, section 7, stolen agricultural products. 7.1, a person who steals any quantity of agricultural products is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $100,000 or to imprisonment for 5 years or both. And at 2, a person who is in possession of commercial quantities of agricultural products and fails to produce at the request of a police officer or within 24 hours of the date of that request, A, a receipt, delivery note, bill of lading, or B, proof of ownership or of lawful possession, or otherwise satisfy a police officer that he is in lawful possession of the agricultural products, is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $100,000 or imprisonment for 5 years or both. This is legislation that we took a lot of time to work on, and with consultation with the Barbados Police Service as well. The legislation is very clear. Farmers have reported theft, and they are not satisfied that enough is being done. So my question is, how are we prepared to ramp up support to the farmers based on this act that is before us? And what is the status of the predial larceny unit?
I'm going to ask the Commissioner of Police to answer this query.
Thank you. In respect of the whole question of predial larceny, and by extension, all matters pertaining to agriculture, whether animal, vegetables, or whatever. Now, the police service, we are also very concerned anytime a report of theft of livestock or crops reported, and we put our resources out there to ensure that all available steps are employed or taken to deal and address with those situations and instances of theft. Now, in terms of the predial larceny squad or unit, there is still that presence operating in the major agricultural belt in the island. That is in the southern part of the country. That is St. Philip and St. George. And that is where we get most reports of predial larceny coming to us. Presently, we have island constables and police officers working together from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. every night except Sunday. So the presence of the police officer and IC is very noticeable in those districts. Currently, the problems that we are seeing, mostly focusing in the Draxall area and Chapel area. We have a close and a regular relationship with the managers, plantation managers, in terms of planting season, reaping season, and such like. So we use that information to plan our resources, deploy our resources, and plan our course of action in dealing with these issues. Now, mind you, most of these events of theft occur under the cover of darkness. And that's a challenge for us, because if police and ICs are out in the field at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning, the whole environment, landscape, creates a challenge for those persons out there. You can wait out and see what is happening and listen and things like that. But when you start to really move around, that is where the challenges come. And the areas where the persons go to, they are very heavily vegetated. Lots of bush and such like. So there are challenges that those persons who are working on a nightly basis, when they're out there working. Now we engage the plantation owners with getting them to purchase aspects of technology. That is putting up cameras, and some persons even mention purchasing some drones. But that has not come on board in a big way as we would like. But we continue to encourage those persons to use the technology to their benefits. Cameras. We have had successes in terms of arresting persons who were caught with the employment of cameras. So some persons are working with us, but some persons are heavily, overly so on the presence of police officers. That is our role, to protect, to serve, and arrest persons when they commit crime. And we will not pull back from that. But we have to get everyone working with us to prevent this problem from occurring. So yes, we are well aware of our remit when it comes to working with the farmers and removing these persons who are currently committing these types of crime. Now, mind you, there's also some reference to what is done with persons when they are caught committing these acts of theft against the farmers. Now, we are well aware that there's not the bite when it comes to punishment in terms of setting examples for persons who are most likely, not most likely, very often caught committing these crimes. The law is there, but there seems to be a soft spot in the hearts of some persons that you don't kill a man for stealing those things. So the whole question is whether or not we should engage persons to make examples of persons who commit these types of crimes. It is something that we need to look at very deeply, because if it is not the deterrent factor where these people are concerned, you always get these types of offenses occurring. So yes, we will continue to do our best to assist the farmers, but they're too got to come on board and hold hands with us and do their part. Thank you.
Thank you. My follow-up question is in the area of enforcement. The legislation speaks to receipts, bill of lading, and at Section 8 of the legislation, it also speaks to search of vehicles, police stopping and searching vehicles without warrant, asking people to produce proof of ownership, produce bill of lading or an invoice, which goes beyond just having to wait out or relying on having to get past Bush in order to deal with people, but using the legislation itself to enforce what it says here about producing, delivery, note, bill of lading, give other proof of ownership of lawful possession, or satisfying police officer that he is otherwise in lawful possession of the commercial quantities of agricultural products. Many farmers have reported to me that they have gone to the police station to report theft and have even identified possible suspects, but the process is still slow. So I'm asking how we can wrap this up, how much more we can perhaps sit down and go through this legislation again and see what we can do to take this forward in the future to assuage the concerns of the farmers out there.
Over time, we have stopped persons who are transporting those produce by both day and night. It happens on a regular basis. We also visit locations, markets, various places where vendors operate early on mornings and do some checks on persons when they arrive to display the goods for sale. We ask questions and persons are asked to account for these produce and such like. So those things are ongoing. Once in a while, we come up with persons who cannot give a reasonable account for how they come by these products. And those persons are taken into custody, they are questioned, and if enough information comes by, or come to us, whereby we can prefer a charge or charges against those persons, that is done. There's still room for more collaboration between the farmers and the police. And that is something that I can say that we would have to work on, that constant interaction, because what is occurring is that there is the absence of regular engagement with persons in the agricultural belt and the police. And as the minister mentioned, we would work to our most best in satisfying those persons that we are not leaving them out there on their own, that we have an interest in what is occurring in terms of theft at these various plantations, various locations, and I reassure them that we would address all matters coming to us, and know that it has been mentioned that these events are not attended to in a hasty manner. That is something that I would address and make sure that my officers pay close attention to these reports and put things in place to address situations going forward. So thanks for bringing that information to my knowledge.
Thank you, Commissioner. One final question, Honourable Chair. With the increase in commercial activity, certainly in agricultural produce, but other commercial items as well, I've come to notice that Six Roads has become a commercial hub, transcending many types of businesses. And I do recall that there was a previous conversation about having a civic center there. I know that the District C police station is in a fairly decrepit state, and the police officers there obviously have to bear it out. The District C Magistrates Court had been moved, and the people of St. Philip in general have asked me to come here and ask what is happening with the District C police station, and if in fact we are going to see a center at Six Roads that covers the police station and the magistrate's court.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think I can give you some short answers to that. while the District C station is not in the best of shape, I wouldn't call it decrepit. We've spent some money on it in the current financial year. But it is obvious that with the growth in the population of St. Philip as a whole and the areas surrounding St. Philip, the amount of commercial activity that is taking place in St. Philip, but in more particularly in the Oistins and in the 6 roads and its environs. Then of course you have 4 roads and so on. And added to that, some spikes in criminal activity in the area. It is evident that we need to improve the police presence in St. Philip. District C, as it stands, has virtually outlived its usefulness. And we are committed to putting a new police facility in the 6 roads area. Of course, as you know, we wouldn't just build a police facility, we would co-locate with a police facility, a new magistrates court and other civic facilities, post office and so on. So I hope that we'll be able to make some progress on that. We have had a design submitted, but the design was for a multi-story building and we didn't think that that was the direction that we wanted to go in. So we're looking at a different kind of design. But I anticipate that certainly by middle of this financial year, we should be able to put out something to invite designs so that we can then move to giving the people of St. Philip a new civic center, much like the people of St. Joseph got one 20 years ago.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Leader of Government Business will be the last person before we come back to the AG to wrap up this head.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Honourable Member, you said Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Oh, I thought you said Leader of the Opposition because I would like to ask a final question.
You don't know which seat you
I
have.
beg your pardon? Yeah, but I need to ask another question.
We are with the Honourable Leader of Government Business, Honourable Member.
May I reserve the right to follow on the Leader
We
of
are
Government
wrapping
Business?
up after the Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Yeah, but I'm asking to reserve the right to ask a final question after the Leader of Government Business in the interest of democracy and in the interest that this entire affair should be transparent.
And it is Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Throughout the course, I think, of the last few hours of this particular discussion on this head, I think it has become clearer to the public the clear distinction between certainly the government's approach to crime and certainly, and I'm not sure if the Leader of the Opposition speaks for himself or if he speaks for the party that he represents, but there's clearly a distinction in the thought and the approach taken by the two sides. And I start there, Mr. Chairman, because I feel a bit uncomfortable knowing that there have been so many reports written over the course of the last few years by many of the persons, certainly in the Criminal Justice Research Unit, and many other social workers who have alluded to the fact that as it relates to crime, that we are noticing that incarceration alone is not the solution to dealing with persons who continue to offend and certainly re-offend. Many of the reports speak to a lot of the social factors that lead to persons being involved in crime, whether that relates to social issues, whether it relates to poverty, whether it relates to housing, whether it relates to lack of opportunities, access to educational opportunities, and the list goes on. Our approach as a government has clearly been, and you've heard it from the Attorney General in his presentation, and certainly the member for the city as well, in relation to the National Prevention Committee approach, that our approach has been to take into account a lot of those factors, to look at the fact that you can't just incarcerate, or as others have said, lick and lock up, but you also have to look at the causes of crime and try to address those things. Otherwise, we're going to keep continuing to go in a circle where we're just locking up people, but they come out and they reoffend. And all of us who are in tune with what is happening on the ground in our respective constituencies can report on the fact that the incarceration on its own is certainly not sufficient. For those who need to be incarcerated, there's a method for dealing with that. But there are genuinely some people who make mistakes, and those persons, we believe, ought to be given second chances. I certainly don't want to live in a Barbados where there are two Barbadoses, one where certain people of a particular class are the beneficiaries of being given second chances, and the people who have been the result of low opportunities or no opportunities at all are persons who we do not find a way to cater for. And so I think that the initiative introduced by the Prime Minister and in turn executed by the Attorney General and his ministry along with the member for the city is a noble one. It is perhaps the first attempt by us as a country to be able to grapple with these issues frontally. Obviously it doesn't sit well for some, particularly members of the leader of the opposition who for his whole life has no doubt benefited from those who have been before the courts. But for the rest of us who deal with the real issues on the ground, I think there is merit in being able to have an approach where we give people second chances once they themselves are prepared to enter into certain terms and conditions for those second chances. Equally, we have a responsibility to put in place mechanisms to stop people from entering into a life of crime, or if they want to opt out early, to be able to have opportunities to be able to do so. And so I certainly would want to support what the Minister and certainly the entire ministry is doing in relation to this area. And I think it is not lost on a lot of the young people who've been given these opportunities that this government does care. We have seen it in relation to several programs where we don't leave people behind. We may terminate a program, but in every instance, this administration has made sure that we've provided training opportunities. And that is as a result of a philosophical position that we have taken over the years, that we carry along people. That this is not about just because you went to a particular school or you're from a particular social class that you are basically only entitled to have second chances. And we all know of what I speak. Now, Mr. Chairman, in my commending the government for this approach, there are a few issues I want to speak to and ask the AG and his team to perhaps address. I represent a constituency which is, I'm hearing more and more deemed as the hot spot of hotspots across the island. I've come from a position where I know when my father represented St. Michael's Southeast, he came in at a time when the Pine was referred to as P for Pine, P for Perry, and P for prison. And the Perry in the reference referred to a magistrate then whose position was that if you came from the Pine and you appeared before him, that you were destined to go to prison. We were able, through the Barbados Labour Party and certainly my father's representation at the time, to be able to introduce a lot of the programs of which the AG's office is now implementing, whereby you look at a holistic approach to dealing with community activities, you make sure that you have educational opportunities to lift people from where they are and to give them a different avenue, show them a different light. And we find ourselves in a situation in that particular part of my constituency again, where it is being deemed a hot spot. Now, I heard the commissioner yesterday speak to this issue of complaints against the police not being as high as perhaps I think the general public we may have a different view out there as to whether there are those complaints against the police. And I want really, first of all, to address this issue because I think in everything that we're speaking about, we want more people to come to the force, we want more people to come up and serve, we want to ensure that the intelligence and the information is being handed over to the police in a timely manner so that they can solve crimes. I think we have to deal with this issue frontally of ensuring that the image of the police is also preserved as it relates to combating and fighting crime. And in my constituency, there have been several scenarios where persons have complained openly. It's a different time that we live in now where people go on social media. So they've avoided going to the Police Complaints Authority. And instead, they have resorted to taking it to social media to complain for certain acts that they believe have been carried out by the officers. Therefore, I am not sure that the fact that you're not getting the level of complaints coming in is indicative of the police having found the solution to the challenges that people are encountering in dealing with the officers. And I would want, AG, if you can speak a bit to where in these estimates are we placing resources to support the Police Complaints Authority? Because the view obviously out there is that the police are investigating themselves, that the information is not on the reports going up to the relevant authority in a timely manner, that the cases are not being disposed of quickly. And therefore that creates its own level of frustration in the public towards police officers. And I think it also frustrates the level of cooperation that officers might perhaps benefit from if we were able to solve a lot of these issues that currently exist. So that's my first question. What are we doing in relation to strengthening the Police Complaints Authority so that the public feels as though their complaints about behavior of officers, the way that they're treated when the police are executing their duties, that these things, that we can give some comfort to the public that we are actually taking steps to address these complaints?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The estimates for the Police Complaints Authority have been static over the last few years. So that you'll see that in the provision for 2025-26, we're looking at $313,000, $323. Last year's estimates, the figure was $313,533. So the figure more or less remains the same. The number of complaints, and I have to say that the complaints are found in two streams. In one instance, you can apply to the Police Complaints Authority under the legislation, or you can also go to the Office of Professional Responsibility. Traditionally, I think the statistics will show that you get more reports going to the Office of Professional Responsibility coming to the Police Complaints Authority. There is not a huge backlog. We do have a very small backlog, and that is in part because in the investigation of complaints, sometimes challenges are encountered because the authority is trying to investigate a complaint. The police officer is on duty, so you can't really get to see him. So there are those kinds of difficulties that create problems. I met with the Police Complaints Authority, the entire authority, in the month of September, and I asked them to say to me candidly two things. One, are you satisfied with how you are working now? And two, do you want me to amend the legislation to give you more teeth? Here's the challenge, Honourable Member. The Police Complaints Authority has the power to investigate complaints, but it has no power to sanction. None at all. It has the power to recommend certain things to the Commissioner of Police, but the Commissioner of Police is not duty-bound to follow the recommendation of the Police Complaints Authority. While we had a robust discussion, and I believe there is a sense coming out of that meeting with them that they do want to be able to exercise a greater level of supervision. So for example, they've said, we want legislation amended to make sure that when a matter is sent to the police commissioner, that he has to come back to us within a certain period of time so that we can see what he's done. If we're not satisfied with what he's done, we want to be able to go over his head and go straight to the Protective Services Commission. So there is room for amendment, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to devote some parliamentary time to put in those amendments in place. The commission, the authority meets on average once a month. They've tried to be very neutral in their approaches. They've met with police independently to understand how police work, how police stations work, to understand the apparatus. They've been able to dispose of quite a few matters. In my view, they refer way too many matters back to the police, but I'm satisfied that there's room for improvement. We have made provision for them to be able to engage under professional services. You'll see the amount of $75,000. The Complaints Authority has very limited staff. They only have one investigator. And that one investigator has to investigate every complaint that comes in. And so a recommendation has been made by me to them that they look to engage retired police officers who may have some time on their hand, or retired BDF officers who arguably would not have a conflict, so that the investigative process can move ahead a lot faster. And you'll see that provision is there, and they're being encouraged to do that. All in all, the public confidence in the police will be bolstered by an authority that is seen to have powers of discipline, so that we don't have an investigation and then it goes over to the police, perceived by the public as being an old boys club. In my view, they do need to have some teeth so that they can more effectively deal with the issue of sanctions.
Thank you, AG. Just to reinforce, though, that, again, perception is key. And certainly when the Honourable Member for Christchurch East was president of the bar and I was secretary of the bar, one of the things that we had to focus on was dealing as lawyers in terms of making sure that the perception of the public towards attorneys, say, who carried away people's funds or did things that were incorrect, that we aggressively went after them. And all I will say is that the public will only be settled and comfortable when matters are disposed of quickly and that justice is seen to be done. Because when I was a practicing attorney, there are cases that are still outstanding and that people still feel aggrieved as a result of not feeling as though justice has been seen to be done. So I do feel that as we try to embolden the police service, we have a responsibility to make sure that we put the necessary resources behind these types of agencies and certainly the investigations to make sure that the public feels satisfied that justice is also being done in that respect. That leads me, therefore, to another question. I mentioned earlier the issue of the challenges that we've been having in the Pine recently. And while I support the installation of cameras across the constituency, because I think it makes life a little bit easier for the police when they're investigating crimes. It is not new to any of us. When we get on a plane and we go to another jurisdiction, we are met with CCTV from the time we get off the plane into public spaces. So it is not new. It is not uncommon to use cameras to be able to not only act as a deterrent for crime, but also to ensure that if there is a crime committed, that the police are able to be assisted in their investigations. But what I would want you to speak to is whether these estimates are seeking as well to increase the number of cameras and surveillance mechanisms across the country, because I would not want that St. Michael's Southeast, and in particular the Pine, is in any way singled out as a hot spot, but that if we are going in the direction of looking at different methodologies to fight crime, that there are going to be equal resources in the areas, certainly, that the streets, and I say the streets loosely, are well aware are also other trouble spots, and that they too will be on the radar for the police when it comes to the installation of cameras. And just a follow on to that would be, I know that we've had our discussions in relation to the surveillance assisting, certainly the Ministry of Transport and Works, to be able to deal with some of the trouble spots where we have PSV operators not complying with the regulations. And so I just want to be clear whether we are making the additional provision in these estimates to increase the number of cameras and surveillance mechanisms across the country for those two purposes.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I've used the term force multiplier on a few occasions during the course of the last 7-8 hours. The installation of cameras is an important investment and an important tool in the arsenal of the police service. Your constituency has not been singled out at all, I assure you. In fact, there's some specifics that I will not go into, but I think the public must be made aware that there's intended to be a significant increase in CCTV cameras all across Barbados. This is now a tool that I think people understand how they can be used, and it is not about trying to peep into anybody's business or invade anybody's privacy. It is about protecting the entire society. Your constituency was able to benefit in the aftermath of a spate of criminal activity because we had some cameras on hand that were intended for elsewhere. So a decision was made that we would defer that and make sure that we install the cameras in the area of the Pine and surrounding areas, because common sense would tell us that you can't just install cameras there. You have to cover off areas in proximity to. But these estimates do provide for an increase in CCTV footage all across Barbados, as did last year's estimates. So I think Barbadians are going to have to get accustomed to seeing CCTV cameras located in many more public spaces in Barbados. And I hope that they will appreciate that they're being put there for their protection. May I also say, though, it has now become quite commonplace for the police service, the investigators, when they go to crime scenes, to look around to see what cameras are located on buildings and households. And we've had meetings, for example, with the Chamber of Commerce and other players to say to them, as your members are constructing their buildings, and as they are looking to put in various security mechanisms, that we want to urge them to put in security mechanisms, put in cameras that can be of benefit to the Barbados Police Service as we do our investigations. There are a lot of areas that don't have CCTV cameras, but we are able to, because the householder has cameras, we're able to pick up elements of the streetscape and so on, and that has been of tremendous assistance to us. So your constituency has not been singled out, and we can expect that we will see many more CCTV cameras being installed all across Barbados.
And just one final comment, a question to you. Obviously, we've spoken a lot in these estimates thus far regarding the victims of crime, also the families that are impacted by crime as well. But there's another layer, I think, that we need to deal with frontally. The member for Christchurch East mentioned the condolences to the former Inspector Rodney Innes, and I know the police have had a blow of a series of persons who have died recently, so again, condolences to you, certainly from all of us. But Inspector Rodney Innes does stand out because certainly on every murder scene that I have been on, because in St. Michael's Southeast, he was one of those officers that was always present, and certainly as all who have spoken of him would tell the tale of the fact that the empathy that was shown was something that I think it ought to be encouraged within the Barbados Police Service. But it leads me to the question of whether we are looking out for the mental health of our officers as well. And whether, sometimes we don't think about these things, but the truth is that these types of jobs certainly bring great strain to individuals and, in terms of the investigation, what they're seeing constantly on the ground. And I don't know whether we've taken that into account in terms of provisioning for the welfare of our officers who have to encounter these types of situations on a daily basis. So I don't know if you can speak firstly to whether that has been taken into account, particularly since we are seeing an increase in the types of murders that have been taking place as well across the country. And obviously some of the same officers are obviously doing a lot of the investigations as well.
I'm going to ask the Commissioner to respond to that, and then I'll address a few of those matters in my wrap-up.
Thank you. In terms of the welfare and the well-being of the officers, that is something which we take very seriously, I must say. And over time, we have gone in directions whereby we make sure that resources are given to these officers who we know and suspect to be in need of that type of care and attention. Now, in terms of the actual rollout of treatment to these officers, we have employed at least 3 retired nurses to come in on a monthly basis and do the checks on our officers, blood pressures, or whatever, have that type of interaction, engagement with them, how they're feeling, and they would recommend and highlight also any problems which they're experiencing health-wise. We expose, especially when they come into situations involving death or serious injuries, they too are exposed to a level of counseling from professional agencies, whereby their peace of mind, well-being, and work-life balance are brought under control and managed in the best way for them. There's also the need to encourage our officers, because that was missing where I was concerned, because officers seems not to pay close attention to their personal health challenges. And that is a difficult position for us in getting them to come around to that level of thinking. People see themselves, well, it's not a problem. But over time, these situations develop until most of the time, we only become aware of these situations when they reach crisis stages. And we are trying to pull back from that and ensure and encourage officers to every month go and get checks done. Because persons go from station, that is, nurses go from every police station to meet officers on a monthly basis for that. So persons have a good idea how their health is progressing or not progressing, whether or not they are in the pink of health or whether or not they are in the doldrums in terms of managing their health situations. But we are fully conscious of the need to have proper functioning officers on board where we are concerned. As you mentioned, it is an extremely stressful job, and we are well aware of the hazards and situations that can elevate stress and other niggling injuries where they are concerned. So thank you for that observation and the interest which you have shown in the welfare of members of the organization. Thank you.
If it pleases Your Honor, I wish to exercise my right to further question on one other area. And it is a constitutional right. The office that I hold is constitutional. I don't do this at sufferance or at the will of anyone. This is a right that I have in this debate, and I wish presently to exercise my right to ask one further question on one other area. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Proceed, Honourable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Attorney General, the Honourable Attorney General, this country is now into its 4th year claiming Republican status. I said it's into its 4th year because I think it is 3 years, 3 months hence, the date of declaration that this country became a republic. It is not my present purpose to challenge that status, since as a lawyer of many years' experience, I stand in agreement with the position that when the office of head of state was repatriated from that of a Governor General who was the Queen's representative or the monarch's representative to that of President authentically head of this state, so being a Barbadian, that the status of republicanism was established. However, the government makes the concession impliedly that the process remains incomplete while we have a constitution that is in essence and in substance still what we lawyers call Westminster styled. In other words, apart from the repatriation, so stated earlier, there has been no fundamental amendment to that Westminster style constitution. And as I've said, the government makes the concession that that is the case, and that concession is proved by the fact that the government has embarked on a course of constitutional reform, and one assumes that that constitutional reform is intended to lead to what we may describe ultimately as a full Republican constitution. Now, you will admit, learned Attorney General, that it is a process that is unusual. And it is unusual if one looks at the case of Jamaica, that is presently now engaged in constitutional reform towards a republic, but they remain monarchical. Dominica, the same thing. They did constitutional reform, completed that constitutional reform, and then went republic. Trinidad, the same. Guyana, the same. India, the same. I can name all of the countries. Now, that is a criticism that will not be the essence of the present exchange. All that the present exchange is intended to do is to ask this government, through you, Mr. Attorney General, to give this country some idea or indication as to when that process of constitutional reform will be completed. In other words, when will this country have that new constitution? That is the question. When do you anticipate that this country, into its 4th year of Republican status, when will this country have that new constitution? Thank you very much. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I am not in any way seeing how that question is associated with the estimates that have been laid before Parliament. But I'm happy to engage on it nonetheless. A constitution is nothing more or less than a set of fundamental laws which govern or regulate the affairs of a state, often touching on concerning matters relating to how the state relates to its citizens. A Republican constitution is a constitution which does exactly the same thing but provides for the head of state to be a president. Mr. Chairman, Barbados has a constitution that provides for its head of state to be the president. Barbados has a constitution that satisfies all of the recognized norms that one expects to see in constitutions. It provides for a parliament. It provides for an executive. It provides what are called Bill of Rights. It provides for a judiciary. Barbados has a constitution that regulates the affairs of the government and its citizenry, as I address you in this chamber. The extent to which a person may consider our Constitution to be deficient is a very subjective thing. We recognize, however, and it had nothing to do with our move to becoming a republic, nothing at all. We recognize that it was important for us to take a look at our Constitution and see whether there were any changes that needed to be made, whether it had become outmoded or outdated in any way, to see whether there were new norms emerging that we ought to take into account. And for that reason, a Constitution Reform Commission was established. The Honourable Member participated, though I suspect rather half-heartedly, in the deliberations of that Constitution. In fact, I would remind the Chamber that the life of that Constitution Reform Commission was about to come to an end at the time when the Honourable Member took up his seat on the other side of the chamber. And the chairman of the commission said, "We have already met with the Democratic Labour Party." We met with the Democratic Labour Party. But they had not met with the leader of the opposition because at the time there was none. At the time, the Democratic Labour Party had no seat in Parliament. And as was required, I had to go to Cabinet and seek an extension of time for the life of the commission so that they could do the Honourable Member the courtesy of meeting with him to hear his views as the leader of the opposition. That work is completed. The country in January received a formal presentation of the report of the commission at an event held in the Grand Salle at the Central Bank. The report of the Constitution is available online on all of government's websites, on the Commission website, for consideration by all Barbadians. And already Barbadians have said, some have said it's foolishness, some have said it's a waste of time, some have said it didn't go far enough. The report is, the work of the Commission is finished, the Commission is now functus. But we now have to engage in the exercise as a government now in examining the report of the Commission, having further consultations, and seeing if that draft constitution as presented reflects where Barbados is to go. I cannot tell the Honourable Member when that will happen, because the Honourable Member should recognize that there is still a significant amount of the journey left to be taken. We carried a report, we carried a health services amendment to deal with picking up, with keeping your house clean, to select committee. That's just a small amendment to an act. how much more then would be expected of us when we are going to be looking at introducing, when we may be looking at introducing a new constitution to Barbados? I cannot answer the honourable member's question. I have no provision in my estimates for that work. That work, while it was managed by the Office of the Attorney General, was funded by the Cabinet Office, not by the Office of the Attorney General. So, while the honourable member is able to ask whatever question he wishes, I would suggest to him that the question that he's posed is really meant for elsewhere and perhaps for a different occasion. As I wrap up this exercise, I believe it is fair to say,
I beg your pardon, sir.
as I wrap up this exercise,
As the rules provide, may I have my
no,
first...
there was no question on the
follow-up.
estimates, Mr. Chairman. There was no question on the estimates.
If the Attorney General, if the learned Attorney General is saying that he is, and he did say, I am unable to answer the question, let the country therefore be satisfied with that answer. That this country has heard the learned Attorney General say, I am unable to answer the question. That is it from me. You're most polite and kind, sir. Thank you very much.
Honourable Attorney General, you may.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much. And I want to thank you for indulging the honourable member, the Leader of the Opposition. It is clear that he's had 7 hours, 8, to engage this office and my officers on the estimates that we've put before the country. A grand total of $270 million. It is for the country to determine whether they consider his engagement in this exercise to have been worthy or not. I want to say only, Mr. Chairman, that to whom much is given, from him much is expected. Year on year, we have been the beneficiary of increasing amounts out of the country's coffers to attend to the wide raft, RAFT, of things that this office has to deal with. A lot of people think that the only thing the Office of the Attorney General does is relate to crime matters. You can tell that I have a lot of officers behind me who have absolutely no association with the police at all, in any way. Our office takes care of all of the legal matters for the government, whether it is contracts, whether it is litigation, whatever it is, whether it is just advisory. Our office is responsible for the management of the judicial system in large measure. It is responsible for, in some respects, civic buildings. It's responsible for many things. You discovered yesterday it is even responsible for making sure that we have a landscape that is free of the EU blacklist. Our officers have worked hard, and I believe that they have satisfied that concept that to whom much is given, from him much is expected. We've got more money this year than ever before. But it isn't because we wanted it. It is because the mission that is ahead of us continues to be great. It is because I believe the Office of the Attorney General has a team that is able to discharge the responsibility and to fulfill the confidence that the government of Barbados has placed in it. Ask ourselves, when in the history of Barbados have we ever been able to do 292 criminal cases in a year? And of that number, Mr. Chairman, 31 were murders. It is a sad reflection that we have to do trials of 31 people for murder. That is true. But it means that the system that we've put in place, that we've resourced in this way, has been tested, and it means that the system has proven that it can deliver. The police service has delivered for the people of Barbados time and time and time again, and we intend to do right by them. The draftsmen who are in the office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, well, I should say draftswomen because most are women. We only have, I think, one male. When many of us are asleep, are up late at night, trying to determine exactly what is the appropriate clause that we should employ to satisfy the wishes of an executive. The bottom line, Mr. Chairman, then is this. This ministry has been entrusted with a solemn responsibility. We've been provided with the resources to discharge that solemn responsibility. And I can say without fear of contradiction that we shall do what we've done in years past. We shall deliver for the people of Barbados. It is true that new times require new approaches to things, and some may have some discomfort with it. But if we keep doing the same thing all the time without any willingness to innovate, then I think you know what will happen. They say, in fact, that if you keep doing the same thing all the time and expecting a different result, that is a sign of lunacy. Nobody could say that this administration is in any way lunatic, Mr. Chairman. I commend these estimates, $270+ million to this chamber, and I beg to move that this head stand parked.
The question is that this head 30 stand part. All members in favor, say aye. All members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr.
Honourable
Chairman.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favor, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Committees have reported progress and request leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 12:35 p.m.
The question is that this Honourable Chairman be suspended until 12:35 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chairman stands suspended until 12:35 p.m.